Abhi Sastri, founder and CEO of Fluix. Thank you so much for being on the Results Loading podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Glad to have you here, man. Abhi, to kick things off, would you mind telling us a little bit about how you got here, the genesis of Fluix, the initial execution for Fluix? I want to hear everything. You're obviously crushing it today. Top 5 at eMerge in Miami this year. How did we get here?
Yeah, so again, my name is Abhi. The company I'm building, just to give you guys what we're building right now, it's called Fluix. We're building autonomous AI to save facilities on energy costs. So think of your HVAC, your lighting, your water systems all working together autonomously. And we could save data centers. That's our primary customer. We could save them potentially 40% on their energy bill. How I got here was really, I was born in India, came over to the States in 2006. I didn't have too many friends. It was difficult making friends. And mostly what I did was play video games. So me and my brother was always into tech. We would buy, game consoles. We would take them apart, put them together. That naturally evolved in high school where I built and sold computers. So this was around, like 2012. You would grab parts off Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and you would go meet strangers, how it used to be back in the old days. And you would put parts together and you would have a desktop computer. You could play video games. You could, do mods, emulators, all that stuff. So I was really into that. I went to school at the University of Central Florida for aerospace engineering. I come from an Asian immigrant household. Education is how you kind of make it. And I lost all my scholarships in 6 weeks to my own volition. It was my fault, right? But I couldn't go back to my folks who made all that sacrifice coming to this country and tell them, hey, I can't pay for school now. And I can't pay for, even my room in my dorm. So I had to kind of resort to entrepreneurship. I didn't even know what the word entrepreneurship was even back then. So I started this business building and selling computers again. But now it was a little bit different because people were mining cryptocurrency, if you remember that, Mike. So everybody was mining either Ethereum, all these different cryptos. And essentially they needed a high performance computer. And I would be the guy that would source parts, put a computer together and sell this computer off. And I would do it out of my dorm. And that naturally transitioned into me meeting a business advisor at my university. He said, hey, anyone can build a computer. You have to build the technology. That's what really builds a moat that not many people can replicate. I was going to school for engineering. So, you get fluid mechanics, you get heat transfer, all that stuff. So the first product was actually, how do I cool down this computer chip more efficiently? And it was a liquid cooler. It was a hardware product that we got a patent for. And essentially, we manufactured it. We'd send it off to manufacturers. They would machine it. We'd come back to our little dorm room. We would assemble it, and we would create a water-cooled PC or a water cooler. And we would sell that cooler to computer manufacturers. We started cold calling. Go on Google Maps. We would type in computer manufacturer and cold call them. Sometimes it would be a small PC mod shop. Sometimes it would be like a small shop of Dell, for example. Got that to, doing pretty well. When I graduated, I had a co-founder at the time. He was the PhD in mechanical engineering, but the business wasn't making enough money for me to, contribute back to my household. I couldn't take a salary. And you know how it is, you're going through college on LinkedIn. You're like, oh, business is doing great. You're winning this pitch competition. You're doing that. You're doing this. But you're looking at the bank account and it's not looking so good. So that naturally evolved, and kind of make a long story short, I had to go get a job. I used my aerospace engineering degree, went to become a DoD contractor, go work for one of the primes. And while I was working for a prime, I would take 90% of my W-2 salary and still keep that hardware business running. So I would go pay for engineers in Ecuador. That's where my co-founder was. I would go, pay for manufacturers, et cetera. And, at the time, I would take 3-hour-long lunch breaks and go cold call in the parking lot. And that's how I got the business kind of off. What really got us to what we're building now was, that hardware product was tough. We got a $30,000 purchase order. We didn't know how to fulfill it. I was still using my salary to buy parts. My co-founder was in Ecuador. He was really machining it. He was really getting the designs up and off the ground. Once we got that 30,000 purchase order, that customer we got from a cold call. I went to that customer. I showed him a demo product, and he was like, hey, this looks good. Can you do 60 units, around $30,000. And I was like, oh, that's great. But in the back of my mind, I was like, dude, we don't have inventory for this. I asked him for 50% up front. He gave it to us. And that's kind of how we use it to machine. After that, we got into Techstars. We were applying for accelerators. We thought the product had venture scale. We applied for Techstars Industries of the Future, which was a program that was backed by Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which has the fastest supercomputer. It was backed by University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and TVA. And we got, many people that have gone through Techstars. You get that 120 grand. You think you have some sort of stability. You think you're ready to launch. We thought we were. We had a $30,000 purchase order, so we went through that whole debacle. And in mid-program, me and my co-founder had a breakup. He had a different vision for the business. I had a different vision. We didn't do things the right way, right? We had vested, so that was rough. We both kind of split, and that really lost momentum. We mutually came to an agreement. 8 months later, we went through demo day. It was rough, but what we came back to is like, I wanted to continue with the business, a different version of the business. He wanted to kind of go away from it. So we really came to a mutual agreement. I was able to get back shares. So that was great, but it was a rough period, right? And I went back to my customer base, which was computer manufacturers, data centers. And I realized something, even my own experience working for the DoD, I realized that a lot of these infrastructure data centers, with the growth of AI, these asset classes going to use 20% of the world's power. But when you go into the data centers today, the problem is your HVAC, your lighting, your water systems, they're all disparate. They're all fragmented. They don't work together. So most of the times inside these data centers, you're running the AC at 100%. They're overcooled. So I was really inspired by autonomous driving cars. I was inspired by this type of technology. I said, maybe there's a way we can unify all these systems, have them run autonomously using AI. This was around, early 2022. I found a co-founder who's an AI researcher at UC Irvine. His name is Chase. He's our CTO today, and we ventured into this. So that's kind of how we transitioned. But that was a long story, but it kind of went through this pivots, co-founder breakups, working in corporate America, bringing it back. But that's kind of where we are today. But I'm happy where we are today. I'm happy with the team that we have.
Absolutely. No. And Abhi, I want to rewind a little bit and just touch real quick on the fact that, immigrated over in 2006, got into college and immediately lost your scholarship, and your back was against the wall, and you can't go to your parents for more money, right? You know better. And the fact that you were able to go in and figure it out with your back against the wall and figure out a way to pay for school, pay for the dorms, pay for food, pay for books is such for me, it is the epitome of the entrepreneurial mindset. You have no choice. You must succeed. And failing is obviously okay. But in that situation specifically, back against the wall, I have to figure something out. Failure is not an option. I have to continue with my classes. It is the only way I'll be able to be successful with my career and my entrepreneurial career and what have you. So I think just that's a fantastic way to kind of get going, and really goes full circle for you and what you've been able to accomplish since that time, obviously. So congrats on that. What you guys are doing at Fluix is really revolutionary, especially in terms of energy and the world's consumption, if you will. And it doesn't seem like something that's been completely done before. Correct me if I'm wrong. But what role does feedback play from customers, especially, and in terms of your testing, in order to really fine tune the product and ensure that you guys are putting out something that's quality and actually does what it says it's going to do? What you guys are really doing is, like I said, changing the scope of how we're monitoring energy usage and consumption. Can you speak a little bit to that and how you guys are fine tuning what you're putting out there?
Yeah, when you have a product that can essentially control these critical assets, right? Data centers, if you really bring it back to the core level, whenever you log on to Gmail, even this video call that we're having right now, a server inside a data center is conducting this activity. So let's say a server overheats or we do something wrong, millions of businesses could be affected if that data center is hosting all those services. So what we're doing is critical. It's mission critical. I understood this when I worked for the Department of Defense. So it takes time developing products like this, right? The good news is, I just want to take a step back. there has been people that pioneered in our industry. In 2014, DeepMind AI used machine learning to optimize Google's data centers. They used it in a very particular way. It doesn't really fit some of the other asset classes, but it showed an indication. What we're really building, even though we're pioneering in different ways, is really on the backs of giants, right? And that really puts a validation. But my whole thing was like, Google did it. They really kept the technology for themselves. We have a different version of the tech. We have a different perspective that's really meant for the 2,500 data centers that don't have access to this tech, and they are the ones actually hosting this. So, what really comes down is, can we visit customers? We went through 20 plus customers throughout Louisiana, Georgia, throughout the Bible Belt. We even went door knocking. You can't really door knock to B2B businesses, but we met facility managers inside these co-location data centers. And in the early days, it was really like, hey, we've been in the space, we sold a hardware product. What other, problems do you have? And it's kind of going through the customer discovery process with it, all right? And what we found is a lot of people, they needed to keep the data center running at all costs. They didn't really care for energy savings at that point in time, because if a server went down, who cares if you're saving $200, $300 on your energy bill? But they couldn't continue to do that this way, because what's happened in the last 8 years is energy rates across the US have increased. If you're looking at 36 out of the 50 states, they increased their energy bill by at least 2 cents per kilowatt. That's one thing that happened. Second, all these carbon regulations. If you look at New York, they have Local Law 97. If you look at Boston, they have BARDO. These are basically laws that try to limit the amount of carbon coming off of these buildings. So now these facilities have to look to be more sustainable. And if they can't be sustainable, it's not that they get a tax penalty or that. They really don't care about that. What we found is they can't get customers, because if they're inefficient, they're spending more money on energy to cool down their servers. They're passing that cost along to their customer, which the customers are paying for, services. So really it stops them from getting revenue. So they need to become more efficient. They need to save more money. So when we look at this space, is like, well, can we build a technology where we know it's mission critical, but we know these clients need to save money? When we go speak to these clients, what are some experiments that we can run? Is there an experiment that we can run? Can we go through all the security measures? Can we test this product in an environment, in a live environment? Can we test it in simulation? There is enough pain in the marketplace that they start saying yes to the asks. So the way we go about it is, can we run a very simple experiment? Okay, we tested the proof of concept. Okay, can we run a next step of an experiment? But how? Now let's look at how much savings we're getting. So it is kind of a back and forth, to your point. We do have to make sure that we're up on all of our security and our compliances. But the problem is so big for them that they're willing to try out solutions like us. So that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Totally, and a perfect timing as well, when there's a lot of initiatives today, especially in 2024, for the planet to be much more green. That's why I was just kind of curious as to, how are we fine-tuning it to work for what customers need? Some are still living in the 90s, as I'm sure you are aware of. Some are looking to be more sustainable now. How are you guys, absorbing that feedback and utilizing it to make the best possible solution for your customers?
Yeah, one thing that we got really excited about is first principles. When I go into a building, I need to understand all the HVAC systems. Are they Schneider? Are they Johnson? Are they Vertiv? Because depending on what the systems need, the communication protocol, or what operating status, we need to be able to connect to that system. The way we used to do it is we used to read through all the PDFs and the manuals and try to figure out how do we connect to the system. It's a very manual process to take about 2 months. We've developed a model that essentially the data center gives us all the asset descriptions, serial numbers, PDFs. We can scrape through that, quickly figure out exactly what they need, and then deploy our software. So instead of 2 months of manually going in, trying to figure out what's the data we need, it can be done in 2 weeks. So that's really the value that we provide to a customer that only has a few people inside their space. So that's one of the ways that we leverage and grab data. We need data actively, so there needs to be sensors in the environment. There needs to be people that give us access to that data. But the caveat is, if you give us access to the data, we could potentially save you 40% of your energy bill. So it's kind of a give and take.
Totally fantastic, Abhi. That's really, really incredible stuff. One last question for you. One last, one of the main elements we like to focus here on at the Results Loading podcast is overcoming adversity, especially during the early Genesis days, or the come up or building phase of your startup. During the initial days, is there a specific moment that you can share with us in which you kind of took a step back and said, wow, I mean, I am really taking on a Goliath here. Maybe a moment of adversity that, had you second guessing this idea, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I think it was 8 months after Techstars, right? The money had dried up, bank account was in negative. Business advisors were telling me, hey, this is how you bankrupt a company. I didn't really understand it. I was just like, didn't really understand the concept of bankrupting a company. I was just like, I think I'm going to continue moving forward. Really, really scraped the bottom of the barrel, used my own personal savings, which I didn't have that much of. One thing was, even though it was in a bad place, there were signs. I felt as free as I could possibly be because I just, me and my co-founder mutually came to an agreement. I had my equity. I had the ability to go build something, go solve something. I didn't want to go back to corporate America, but I really realized that, hey, now I have the ability to solve anything I want. I could really reinvent the business. This is a pivot, if you will. So if I can go do anything I want, let me try to go as big as I possibly can. And when I went back to my customers, that kind of matched the ambition. I asked my customers, what is the biggest problem that we could potentially solve? And this idea came up. So even though it was in a dark place, there were signs, and maybe that's spiritual for you. Maybe that's, a business advisor giving you something, but sometimes you got to go into that sign. I'm glad that I made this decision. It's got me to places. I get to travel the world. I get to meet the coolest people. I get to work in the most awesome places. So I'm not regretting it. If I went to corporate America, the level of skills and talent that I would have accomplished compared to this is non-comparable. I'm in a leadership position. I'm getting to speak with people that speak on my pace. I get to learn new things. I get to be humbled every single day. It's funny, a CEO gets fired every single day, right? You lose a customer, you get fired. You don't win a deal, you get fired. But it's okay because it really sharpens the iron. So even though it's in a place of unknown, I'm super happy where we're at. I'm super happy that I can meet other entrepreneurs like you, Mike, and be in this space. So I don't regret it. It was the unknown, but I'm glad that I took the signs head on and continued moving forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely fantastic. And I'm glad that you've made the choice to go down this path, and your talent, your skill set isn't watered down through corporate America, and that you're able to really, truly be free, like you mentioned, running your own business and executing a plan that you came up with from the ground up. Corporate America is great for some people, and others not so much. And so for you to be able to be free and travel the world and do what you want is fantastic. And one last point I wanted to touch on that you mentioned, asking customers, what is your biggest problem? That is such a simple and such an efficient way to take a product to market and really understand your customers so that you're building something that the market will respond positively to. I can't tell you how many times founders think that they have such a great idea, they take to market, and the response is negative. And so having those initial conversations, especially in high volume with the customers and your ICP and what have you, and understanding what their problems are and what their pain points are, and then building around that is so simple yet so genius and not talked about enough. So I'm glad you touched on that as well, Abhi.
Sometimes listening to the customer is the biggest thing, right? VCs will give you a no or a yes, right? It's go back to the customer. I mean, if you build something that people want, you will succeed some way, shape, or form.
Always. Well, Abhi, thank you so much for joining us today on the Results Loading podcast. It's been a pleasure. As always, rooting for you guys over at Fluix, and looking forward to seeing what the world has in store for you guys over at Fluix and yourself moving forward. So congratulations, keep going, and looking forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Abhi. Take care.